Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then, you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I feel like I've been having a lot more connection with my listeners through the Q&As and polls. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Hi, I'm Father Daniel Duplantis, a Catholic priest, martial artist, and host of the Karate Priest podcast. Have you ever wondered what the church teaches about different topics? Are you a martial arts enthusiast or just someone who wants to learn more about martial arts? I'd like to invite you to join me and many guests on my podcast as we cover topics of faith, everyday living, and martial arts on the Karate Priest podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Selling a little or a lot? Do your thing however you cha-ching with Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/offer23.
Hey guys, welcome back to Season 4 of A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today I have a friend with me. This is Danny Tabet.
Hello, Amber.
Hello, thank you so much for coming on here. Today we're going to be talking about the Maronite Church, correct? That's one that you attend, and I'm very excited to get into this.
Yes, so hello again, or as we would say in the Syriac language, peace be with you. And if we're talking about the Maronite Church, I'll be talking later on about how our liturgical language is Syriac, and I'll be comparing, our different traditions. So you're Roman Catholic and I'm Maronite, and we'll get into that discussion.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
I'm excited too. I think this is really important for people to know about because they don't know about all the other different, Catholic churches, that are kind of like out there, and the Maronite is one of them. And I've attended an Eastern liturgy before, which was the Divine Liturgy, the Byzantine. Mm-hmm. And that was very interesting, but it was really cool when at Canchas we were able to actually experience the Maronite Mass because I believe it was what do you call them?
Core bishop.
A core bishop came in and did the liturgy. So that was fantastic. Mm-hmm. But before we get into all of that, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners a little bit?
Yeah, so my name is Danny. I'm 21 years old, and I am a seminarian in the Maronite Church. My seminary is in Washington, D.C. That's where the only seminary for the Maronite Church is in the United States. So we have one in Washington, D.C. It's called Our Lady of Lebanon, and that's where I am a seminarian.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you do that online, or how does that work? Because you're in Chicago right now.
Yes. So when I applied, I was 18, and I was too young to actually move in.
Oh, no.
So the bishop told me to go to another school for a bachelor's degree first, and then I could move into the seminary after I get my bachelor's.
Okay, kind of like a little Saint Therese of Lisieux issue going on
there. Exactly like
Saint
Therese, yes.
That's so interesting. Okay, cool. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's a big topic to go over, the Maronite Church, but I'm really excited for this. So I guess to kind of just start off, what is the Maronite Church, and how could you describe it to those of us who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so the Maronite Church is actually one of 24 Catholic churches that make up the Catholic Communion. So oftentimes when I introduce myself, I tell people I'm Catholic, but I'm not Roman Catholic. And for a lot of people, this can almost shatter their worldview, I think, for a lot of even Roman Catholics who haven't heard about Eastern Christianity at all, even though there are 23 Eastern Catholic churches. So I'm excited to be here, and it's my pleasure to tell you more about my tradition in particular.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's important because, when I came back into my faith, 3 years ago now, I was just like, Roman Catholics, that's the only kind of Catholics that are out. But no, there's so many types. And I just think that's amazing. What's a little bit of history behind the Maronite Church?
So of all of the Eastern churches, right, these 23 Eastern Catholic churches, actually all of the Eastern churches, not even just the Catholic ones, the Maronite Church is the only church that has remained in communion with the Bishop of Rome.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've never separated ourselves from the Catholic communion, and we are very proud of that. So that's something you'll hear a lot of Maronites be proud of and tell their Roman Catholic friends. Also, the Maronite Church is the only church that is not named after a language or an ethnicity or a nationality. We are named after a saint, Saint Maron. So I can't tell you about the Maronite Church and our history without telling you about Saint Maron.
That's awesome. Yeah. Did you have any so I know that the Maronite was based off of Saint Maron.
Yes.
Was he Syriac?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Who knew? So then I know a lot of the times there's people like to compare and contrast, Roman Catholics and other, Catholic churches. So what are some similarities between the Maronites and the Roman Catholics so people kind of have a observation about that?
Yeah, so similarities, obviously we're Catholic, so we believe in everything that the Catholic Church teaches as dogma. But where there is diversity in the Catholic Church, we believe that should be celebrated. So we have a different tradition, right? And we believe that God should be glorified in every way possible. And we glorify God through our different tradition, our different liturgical language, our different saints even. And yeah, we just have a very different tradition than what you'd find in the Roman Catholic Church, whether it's our music, our iconography, our liturgy is pretty different. So, and you'll notice all that when you go to a Maronite church, when you attend the liturgy.
Right. I know that, honestly, I didn't even really hear about Maronites until, I think this year, actually. So, are there a lot of Maronites throughout the world, or is it kind of scarce, or what? How do you find a Maronite church? Because I haven't heard about it.
Yeah. So, Saint Maron was from modern-day Syria. And the Maronite Church grew from this spiritual community, this spiritual movement that Saint Maron founded. So he was a monk. He lived in what's modern-day Syria, and he lived on top of a mountain. Oh. Yeah.
I love that.
He lived on his own on top of a mountain, but people quickly heard about him. People from the nearby villages heard about this man living on the mountain and his intense spirituality. So word about him grew, and people were attracted to his spirituality, his way of life. It's said of other saints, like, for example, when Gregory the Great was talking about Saint Benedict, he said that he lived in a cave. Yeah. And when Saint Athanasius talked about Saint Anthony the Great, he said that he lived in a forest, or in a fort. In a fort. We love the desert. So, yeah, there's no forest there. He lived in a fort in the desert. So, but Saint Maron lived out in the open. So this was a very different kind of spirituality. He lived in the open on top of a mountain. And he attracted many followers, many Christians who felt called to join this movement that he was unintentionally founding of monasticism, of this intense self-denial. And he even had many women disciples, many female followers that remained chaste in their life, and they were some of the first, what we would say, nuns these days. Oh.
Wonderful. Yeah, I know you were saying that, there's some differences in saints, Eastern saints versus, the saints that the Roman Church has. Do you know a few of those saints, or could tell us a little about those saints? I know.
Yes. Yeah. So of those women saints, some that we celebrate in the Maronite calendar, some of the early followers of Saint Maron are Saints Domnina, Marana, and Kira. Marana and Kira were actually sisters. Oh. And they were, some of those early, what we would call nuns now. But some other Maronite saints that we have in our liturgical calendar are Saint Rufka. She's another nun. And she lived in the, I want to say 1800s, late 1800s. And then we also, of course, have some more male saints as well. My favorite saint being Saint Charbel.
It was so funny when I stayed with some Dominican sisters. The lead Dominican sister, she was Sister Charbel. And, and I mean, I never actually knew that he was a Eastern saint, because ignore that. It's fine. Because I always thought that, we all just shared saints.
Yes.
I didn't think that there was like Eastern saints versus, whatever. And so it's very interesting to hear about different saints because, what we have in the Roman Catholic Church, you guys might not have heard of in, the Eastern Church. And I just think that's very, very interesting. But Saint Charbel was definitely one of my favorites. And you gave me some of his prayer cards today. And I don't know. I used to have him on a t-shirt. And I used to wear that t-shirt like all the time because I was just like, this is so cool. But no, that's awesome. And so...
Yeah,
are there go ahead.
People know me as that guy, by the way. I have a really strong devotion to Saint Charbel. I also have a shirt with his face on it. Saint Charbel, pray for us.
I love that.
And I always give people prayer cards. So yeah, my pleasure.
It's important.
Telling people about him. Yeah, of course.
It's important. It's like a part of our faith, Yeah. I would do that with like our saints too. It's just like.
And to comment also on the universality of saints, we believe in the universal Catholic Church. So of course we share saints, and. Well, among Maronite Christians, some of the most admired saints are like Saint Therese of Lisieux, for example, Saint Rita of Cascia. So there are many saints, that are very respected among Maronites that are Roman Catholic.
Right.
So we can share that.
They're like intertwined.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like really cool. Yeah. No, I love that. I also know that because, Roman Catholics, there's a lot of misconceptions about Roman Catholics. Yeah. I'm sure because Maronites aren't as well known as Roman Catholics, there are a lot of misconceptions about them. Are you aware of any, and could you share those with us?
Well, one thing I always get asked is if we're really Catholic.
Oh, it's that question.
And then, of course, we get, happy to tell our Roman Catholic friends, yes, actually, the Maronite Church has always been in communion with the Bishop of Rome. So we're very proud of that. But that is like a misconception that comes up, are the Eastern churches like really loyal, to Rome? And yes, obviously we have a different tradition. We celebrate the same faith, but in a different way.
Right.
And that's something worth celebrating, and that's something worth appreciating, I think, within our Universal Catholic Church. So. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. And I also think, a lot of times people might confuse Eastern Catholic churches with Eastern Orthodox.
Right.
Because I know I got that confusing. Like, I was confused by that so much. I was just like, wait, isn't the Eastern Orthodox, isn't that? So I guess there could be like that little kind of confusion if people aren't aware that there's Eastern Catholic churches. They get a little bit confused about that. But what's your favorite thing about the Maronite Church?
Ooh, okay. Well, to answer that briefly, I love our heritage. The Maronite heritage, you talked about the theme of this podcast being, being a young Catholic in a secular world and how difficult that is. The Maronite Church has been through a lot of trouble and turmoil, trying to survive amidst so much persecution in the Middle East. And then to go back to our previous point about misconceptions, even during the Crusades, when Christians from Western Europe came to the Middle East to help, their Christians and brothers and sisters in the Middle East and to liberate them, a lot of the Crusaders were also unfamiliar with Eastern Christianity. And so they met these people that were Christian, but were celebrating Christianity in a bit of a different way, with their own traditions. And even they didn't get them, right? Wow. So there's always been a kind of a disconnect. And I think it's important for us to have conversations bridging the gap between Western Christianity and Eastern Christianity, so that we can exalt God in all of his glory in all the different ways that we can as Catholics. Absolutely. And also because, I love like my traditional Latin Mass and my Roman faith and everything like that. But to know that there's a whole other side is just so interesting to me. And also the way that, the Byzantines and Maronites, receive communion is completely different.
And I've received Byzantine communion where it's the host and the blood on a spoon, and they give it to you.
Right.
Whereas the Maronite, I don't know if you want to explain how they do communion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one thing that I really like about the Maronite Church. One of my Roman Catholic friends told me that she hadn't received the blood of Christ in literally years.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to me that that was something that I was taking for granted, because in the Maronite Church, we receive by intinction. So INCT INTINCTION. So
Yes.
intinction. And what that means is you receive the body and the blood together at the same time. So the body is dipped into the blood, and then you receive it on the tongue. So that's intinction. And yeah, I never realized I was taking that for granted, because that's the way that we receive traditionally in the Maronite Church. So if you go to a Maronite liturgy on Sunday or any day, that is how you're going to receive the Eucharist. So yeah, it was shocking for me to hear that from my Roman Catholic friend. And if anything, it made me admire the Maronite tradition even more. And so that's one thing I'm proud of. I'm also really proud of our Syriac liturgical language. So the Roman Catholic Church has Latin as her liturgical language. And of course, that comes from those first Christians in the Roman Empire. When they embraced Christianity, they embraced it in their own language, right? And that's how Christianity in the Roman Empire grew in its own context. And then in the Middle East, the language that Christianity was established in was Syriac, right? Syriac is a dialect of Aramaic. So Syriac is Aramaic, and it is, I guess, to give an analogy, it is like ecclesiastical Latin to classical Latin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so it is the language that the church fathers, the Syriac church fathers, kind of made to, I guess they adapted the Aramaic language to fit into their theological worldview, just like the Latin church fathers adapted Latin to be able to talk about theology, thus creating ecclesiastical Latin.
Interesting.
So that's how I would describe Syriac. So that's our tradition. We use Syriac in our liturgy. There are key points in our liturgy where we still use Syriac. Now, if you go to a Maronite liturgy, it's going to be in the vernacular. That's our tradition. So it's always been in the vernacular. You know, in the early church, it was Syriac. That was the vernacular. When the Muslims came and established their rule over lands that Maronites were living in, then the vernacular became Arabic. And so, you know, the priests adapted the liturgy so that it could be understood by everyone. So it's always been in the vernacular, and nowadays, as the Maronite Church has left, grown out of the Middle East, and taken root here in the United States and in other countries, we still use the vernacular, but at key points in the liturgy, Syriac must be spoken.
Oh, why is that? Is it just because it's just proper?
Well, it's our tradition. We're very, proud of it. This is Jesus's language, and we want people to be able to connect to that first century Christianity that the apostles even were passing down, right? And so we want people to be aware that this is a ancient tradition, right? This is a church that goes back 2,000 years. So we've maintained Syriac in certain key points in our liturgy. For example, the words of institution, or what you might call the words of consecration. Those are typically said in Syriac by the priest.
Right.
And very, the words that are said in the institution narrative in our liturgy are very similar, if not the same words that Jesus would have said at the Last Supper.
Right.
So for us, having inherited that liturgical tradition, we're very proud of it, and we want to pass it down, and we want people to hear those words. So it's not just there, but also at other points in the liturgy. For example, the greeting to the altar when the priest first enters the liturgy. Also at the Qadishat, which is an aspect of the Maronite liturgy that you wouldn't find in like the Roman Catholic liturgy.
Oh, yeah.
So there are some differences. So the Kadishat is always said in Syriac.
That's really cool. I know when they were, when they were celebrating the liturgy at Cantius, there was beautiful music. If it was at an actual, Maronite Church, though, would that music be Syriac? Like, would it have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so, well, not completely. So some churches more than others, will include more hymns in Syriac. I would say most people, because, choirs don't necessarily speak the language, they're more comfortable singing in the vernacular, which is great. It's good that we worship God in every language. But traditionally, our hymns, most of them, I would say, were written in Syriac and then translated to another language like Arabic or Latin or English. And then, we sing those translations as well. So we have that heritage. We have a different musical heritage than in the Roman Catholic Church. So if you'll go to one of our churches, I'm sure you notice this also at the liturgy, our music, it's not like Gregorian chant, for example. We have a distinctive musical heritage that is characterized by different sounds and different instruments and stuff like that. So some of our hymns will still be sung in Syriac, but a lot of the times it's translations. Okay. So you'll still get the same message and the same music.
It's really cool because it was really, really awesome being able to experience that, especially at Cantius, because it's like your home parish, but then experiencing a whole other liturgy. It was very, very intriguing. And I remember when the choir bishop walked out, and he was like, it was so pretty. He had like the prettiest just vestments and everything. It was just... I was like, wow. And that's not like 5-minute crafts. Like, that's actual.
He was wearing his choir bishop vestments.
Like that. Oh my God. It wasn't something you can just throw on, that was just so pretty. Because, we see vestments all the time for like feast days and stuff in the Roman Rite. But usually you don't see vestments like that, with, I don't want to say bedazzled, but like that's the only word that comes to mind when I think of it. It's just... so beautiful. And the whole beauty of the Maronite, would you call it a divine liturgy or liturgy?
Yeah, the liturgy.
Is just amazing, being able to experience it. And I noticed there were like a lot of similarities between like the Latin Mass and like the Maronite Mass when it comes to like the pacing of it, in a sense, like prayers at the altar, and things like that. But there was a lot of things where I was like, are we standing? Are we sitting? Are we kneeling?
Ooh, that's a good point.
It's a little confusing. We were looking at you like the entire time. We're like, do we sit? What are we doing?
So the way I think about this is if the president were to walk in, you would stand out of respect. And the same way when Jesus is present in the church, you stand out of respect. So for us, during the institution narrative or the consecration, we stand up for that. So in the Roman Catholic Church, you would kneel down. There is a point in our liturgy where you bow your head. But for, traditionally for the rest of the liturgy, it was all standing, right? And so even when we bow our head, we're still standing during that point. And this is how it was in the early church. You would stand for the whole liturgy because... if someone important is in the room, what do? You stand up. That's how we take it. Yeah.
That's really cool because I remember when we were doing it and we were looking at you and you were like, everyone should be standing right now. And we were like, oh, well.
Yeah, it's funny because even when we have visitors come to my home parish, for example, like a Roman Catholic might come and they might kneel for the institution narrative, which is fine. That's perfectly fine and that's very reverent. But it's just not our tradition. Yeah.
It's just always funny when I see like people up front don't know what they're doing, even at the Latin Mass, and I'm definitely one of those people sometimes where I'm like, wait, where am I?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see how it works because people are like standing, sitting. Yeah. No,
and that's
great.
okay. Like if you are, not a Maronite, whether maybe you're Roman Catholic or you're just not maybe even a Christian, if you come to a Maronite liturgy, like we're happy to have you. We don't expect you to know, where to sit down and where to stand up. Like
it's not like you're gonna get kicked out or anything.
No, of course not.
Do you guys have like a red book, kind of like the Latin Mass does at all?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because those can be really important for like understanding. Because it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's really cool. I know that there's like a lot of resources and stuff out there on like Maronites as well. Are there any specific resources that you're aware of that would be helpful for people at all?
So what I would recommend if someone wants to maybe like learn more about the Maronite Church is just to visit a Maronite Church,
Yeah.
to be quite honest.
Just go.
Just go, see what the liturgy is like, because it's one thing to describe the liturgy to you. It's another thing to experience it. And the liturgy is not meant to be, read in a book. It's not meant to be read, on a website. And it's great that we talk about it, but it is something that is meant for you to be in the experience of, right, of course. So I would recommend go to a Maronite church. You could ask the priest there some questions, maybe after the liturgy. Meet someone there. Like if you're a young person, just go up to another young person. Like I love it when people visit my church, for example, and they come up to me and they're like, "Hey, can I sit with you?"
Yeah.
So yeah, of course, visit a Maronite church. But if you do want to look into some more resources, or maybe some more like media sources, I would recommend visiting the Maronite Seminary's website. There's a lot of helpful articles there. If you're someone that's more like intellectually inclined, visiting the Maronite Seminary's website, that would be a good place to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I would recommend visiting the Maronite Servants of Christ the Light website. They are the convent. They're like the group of sisters that we have in the United States under the Maronite Church that work alongside our priests and our Maronite community in the U.S. So they have a beautiful website. You can follow the seminary on Maronite Seminary, or on Instagram as @Maronite Seminary, and then you can follow the Maronite Servants on Instagram as @Maronite Servants. So pretty easy.
Okay, awesome. Because I know when I was like trying to find resources on the Eastern rites and things of that nature, it's kind of hard to find good resources because sometimes it's just the internet's so vast, and I'm always just like, is this accurate or not? Because that's the biggest issue that I run into with like Google and the internet. It's like I will Google something and I'm like, okay, but is that real? Is that true? So it's great to have good resources. And I know when we were kind of talking about like the core bishop and everything of that. So I'm not sure if many people are going to be familiar with what a core bishop is.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what a core bishop is?
I'm not sure even if the Roman Catholic Church ever had core bishops.
I don't think so.
I don't remember ever hearing about that. But core bishops in the Eastern churches are a rank above priests, but below bishop. So they are, a core bishop, it literally means country bishop. So the word core in Greek is like countryside. So what it is basically a person who functions as a priest. They have their own church, their own parish that they're like a pastor of. And what makes them special is that they have this title that's been granted to them by the bishop, and they have the ability to ordain minor orders, so not priesthood or deacon, I think, but I think they can ordain cantor and lector.
Got it.
Which also don't exist in the Roman Catholic Church anymore, the minor orders. So we've maintained that tradition as well.
Very cool. Yeah, because that's always something that always confused me. I'm like, does he have a really good abs? Like, what's a core bishop?
Yes, that's funny.
Just wants to hit people.
That's really funny.
No, that's awesome, because also whenever I think of like core, I think of like cottage core or something. I'm like, so it's like bishop core? Like, it's an aesthetic? No, that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think it's just really cool learning about different, churches, and the Maronite side of things. Of course. And I would also say, like, I mean, before we go, what were some things that drew you to the Maronite Mass? Just like briefly, because I know on another podcast we're going to talk about your own testimony, but just kind of like a little precursor kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to when we have that episode where I talk about my testimony. But for me, I am a seminarian, of course, so I found something in the Maronite tradition that I really admired, and to the point where I wanted, to become a priest of the Maronite tradition. And for me, it was just really our heritage as a whole. The Maronite Church has something to offer the world, which is our Syriac liturgical language, and just if you look at our history, the things that Maronites have gone through, as Christians trying to maintain this apostolic tradition that was passed down to them amidst so much suffering and persecution in the Middle East under, so many different empires, and Islamic persecution and political persecution and all that. The Maronite Church is very inspiring, and I think her witness is something to be praised. And I am proud to be a part of that tradition, and I am proud to share, obviously, that tradition with other people. And, everyone knows me as that guy who won't stop talking about the Maronite tradition. So I invite all of your listeners, of course, to visit a Maronite church and see the liturgy for yourself. Hear the language that Jesus, would have spoke. Hear those words that he would have said. And even if you stay after, Mass one day, maybe there'll be a potluck, right? Oh. And there might even be some foods there that Jesus himself would have eaten.
Right.
So we're very proud of our Semitic heritage, our Syriac heritage.
That's amazing.
Yes, and I love sharing that with people, of course.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's awesome. Of course. Yeah, I'd love to. Also, just really quick, what were some foods that maybe Jesus would have eaten off the top of your head?
So definitely the spices that we have in our food, and like the herbs and stuff like that, definitely things that Jesus would have been accustomed to. So even as something as simple as that.
That's awesome.
And the way that we eat bread, and the way that we put certain spices in our food, all things that Jesus would have been accustomed to.
That's so cool.
If you ever stay after Mass and there is what we call manaish, for example, that's something that Jesus probably would have eaten during his time.
That would be so cool. We're going when they're having that.
Yes, you're always
so
welcome,
awesome.
Amber.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Maronite
My
Church.
pleasure.
Hopefully people were able to learn more about it and will go discover it for themselves. So thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. I hope you guys learned something new, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to A Catholic's Perspective with me, The Religious Hippie. Make sure to visit my official website at thereligioushippie.com, and while you're there, be sure to sign up for my newsletter to keep up to date with my latest news and offerings. You can also find me on virtually any social media site as The Religious Hippie. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Amber Rose and distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright by The Religious Hippie, NFP. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for The Religious Hippie at thereligioushippie.com or find me on social media for other unique content.
'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
A quest is a search for something. And every week, the Quest podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. I'm your host, Todd Fisher. Join me in this thought-provoking and inspiring podcast of discovery. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts.